Two young girls were last seen walking to a restroom at a football match. They have never been seen since. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of the Adelaide Abductions. Viewer discretion is advised. This case occurred in Adelaide, which is in southern Australia, and the case occurred in 1973. Joanne Ratcliffe, who was born in 1962, she was 11 years old at the time this case happened. Kirste, born in 1968, was just 4 years old. For over 50 years, their families, their friends, everyone in this community has wondered what happened to them. It was August 25th, 1973. Joanne and Kirste were at a football match with both of their families, and I guess their families were acquainted, and they were sitting next to each other. They were watching this football match at the Adelaide Oval, a fairly decent-sized stadium, and it was a packed house that particular day. Thousands and thousands of people were there, which would mean that there are potentially thousands and thousands of witnesses to what happened. On the afternoon the match was taking place, Kirste and Joanne were asked to get up and use the restroom, and their parents said, yes, that's fine. So the 11-year-old Joanne and the 4-year-old Kirste got up from their seats. They walked out of the portion of the stadium where they were sitting, walked to the women's restroom, and that's it. Their families would never see them again. Within, a very, very short amount of time, they realized the girls weren't coming back to their seats. They went to go look for them. They went to the ladies' room, which was just outside where they were sitting, but they weren't in there. They looked at other restrooms. They looked, they were just searching the entire stadium. They can't find them. They're missing. And so the parents of both families report their girls missing. They left their seats at approximately 3:45 p.m. and they were reported missing officially at 5:12 p.m. Now, when I said earlier that there are potentially thousands and thousands of witnesses, well, in fact, there were witnesses that think they saw what may have possibly happened. There were some witnesses who said they saw the two girls playing with like a cat that got into the stadium with other kids. But it's kind of hard to know if they really saw those two girls. But the most substantial witness sighting is that the two young girls were seen in the company of a slightly older gentleman wearing a hat. The man was physically holding Kirste Gordon, or what was believed to be her, and then the other little girl, presumed to be Joanne, was walking next to them. To everyone from the outside looking in, this looks like just a guy carrying his two kids, or walking with his two kids. After this sighting, there would be some people who said they saw the two girls near like a railroad station, and there were other like potential sightings kind of peppered in there all over the place, but none of those leads ever panned out. The most substantial one they had was of this man who was potentially in the company of these two young girls. A gigantic search party began. I mean, the police, the family, friends, volunteers are all out there looking for these two girls. They, at the time, offered a $5,000 reward for anything that would help bring them home. The case rapidly spread. It got widespread attention all over Australia. There were even some potential connections to another abduction, and that was with regards to the missing 3 children, the Bowman Children, who I believe I've covered their case on here before. They disappeared, were allegedly kidnapped in 1966. And so while there is that potential connection, they don't really have any proof that these two different cases are related at all. The parents of both girls would state that they've all been to this, the Oval many, many times before. They had let their kids go to the bathrooms on their own before, and they never had issues. And the Ratcliffe said that their daughter, Joanne, is not someone who just wanders off on her own. She was the older of the two kids, but there just is no way. So they really did believe that this was definitely an abduction. Now it's just a matter of finding out where they are. But unfortunately, their case goes cold pretty quickly. They did put out the composite drawing of the older gentleman who was seen with these two young girls, and it's kind of a pretty frightening looking image, but at least to me. But they put this image all over the news. People saw it all over the country, but they really did not get any substantial tips with regards to the composite drawing. And because of how many people were there that day and how many different witness sightings you would have to kind of investigate, like these are two little girls that look like pretty much any two little girls, right? And so you're going to get a lot of unnecessary or wrong information, but from people who are literally trying to help. But it doesn't help that there were thousands of people there who could have seen something and who could have all seen or interpreted something differently than one another. But like I said, the case, it just goes cold, and it goes cold and colder and colder and colder. And we are now here in 2025. I'm filming this on May 29th, 2025. There still is no answers. Some of the suspects in the Bowman Children case, like Bevan Spencer von Einem and Derek Percy, were at times considered suspects in this case as well. But in terms of either case, no one has ever been apprehended, indicted, or charged or anything. The biggest suspect they have is a man named Arthur Stanley Brown. And when you see images of him, it's eerie. It's actually borderline frightening. Because they have images of him wearing the same hat, basically, that the witnesses saw this man wearing. And if you put these two images side by side, it's like, holy crap, that looks like the guy. That's the same guy. And they got tips and leads about Stanley Hart over the years. As a matter of fact, because he has been such a prominent suspect in this case, they've been able to search several properties that had been owned by Stanley Hart. And the thing is that Stanley Hart was known to frequent the Adelaide Oval many, many, many times. Every time there was a match there, he was there. When they put out Stanley's image in the late 90s, they actually had one of the witnesses who saw the potential abduction happen, would say, oh my God, that is the guy. That's the guy I saw. Because they're showing his image on the news. And even after 20 plus years, she's like, that's who I saw. About 10 years after the girls went missing, Stanley would be labeled a child abuser. They got information from a man named Mark Marshall, who was actually the grandson of Stanley Hart. And he had at one point given testimony, and he actually described the attack against Joanne, that Joanne had been struck by a glass bottle by his grandfather, Stanley. Now, by the time that Mark comes forward with this information, he is actually already himself a pedophile. He says that his grandpa kidnapped those two young girls, basically played it off as if they were his girls. He even claimed to police that he knew where the two girls were now buried. He gave them locations, I guess, near the town of Yatina, and also a tunnel near the Pekina Reservoir in terms of where you could find evidence and stuff like that. Mark Marshall would end up looking at a map with police, and he put a big X on where the girls were, that they were put in barrels and buried there. Well, police, now all these years later, and this is probably like decades later at this point, they go to that area and they search. As a matter of fact, they actually find a couple of barrels. However, when they open them up, there's nothing. They searched an area of tunnels that he said would have evidence. They didn't find anything. They would then search farm properties near where Stanley Hart used to have a farm. Now it's this big open field. And even the people who own it, I guess at this point, are like, yeah, go ahead, search. I mean, we know the story. If you need to search our property, search it. And literally just within a day or so of me filming this video, there was a new article that came out. So there was, I guess back in March or April or so, there was a specific targeted area. They were going to be doing some excavation in terms of investigating this case. And they are digging in the areas where, from before, this Mark person had said where you could find evidence or find the bodies. Lo and behold, just a few months ago, they found a tiny bone fragment in the exact area where Mark said to search. It's a very small piece of bone. You can see it here compared to the size of a coin. And what's most interesting about it is because Mark had said that a glass bottle was used on one of the girls and that his grandpa made him smash that green bottle, which had little, green reflective glass. Well, in this bone fragment, they actually see tiny pieces of green glass, like they're little itty-bitty specks of glass, which actually it backs up his story as to what he's been telling them. In that same area, they also found a shoe, or maybe a couple of shoes, and they were very consistent with the type of shoes that one of the girls was wearing on the day of the abduction. They also found, some buckles. They found a deteriorated suitcase lining to go along with the bone and the shoes. The bone and the shoes are the most promising evidence they've gotten in a very, very long time, because they haven't gotten any evidence. So they take a picture of the bones and they show them to experts, and one expert says that he does not believe that that is actually a human bone. They also reached out to a specialist who was not in Australia. He says that the image of the bone they've seen, or he saw, looks like it could have potentially come from the pelvic area of a young girl. Now again, both of these experts have only looked at it as a photo. They have not physically handled it, as of me filming this video at least, and taking DNA from it or anything like that. That's probably all still in the works. And so the way that because at this point there's private investigators working on this case. At this point they are basically saying that right now we're going with that's human bone, because we found a child's shoe, right? That would have been worn by one of the girls that day. And so until someone says this is definitively not a human bone, they're going with it's a human bone and that they're on the right track. Because once they can establish this bone fragment as a human bone, they can now take this investigation to a whole new level. And a lot of the money that's being used to excavate this stuff is not really coming from police. It sounds like it's coming from volunteers. And every penny they've gotten through people donating has gone towards investigating, digging, all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. In the end, the two girls have still never been located. Until they identify that bone as human, they haven't found anyone. I've been reading some articles. One of their sisters, her name is Susie, and she has been putting a ton of her own effort and work into trying to find her sister, and along with Kirste, because if they find Joanne, they're going to find Kirste. That's the belief. These weren't two girls who were abducted by two different people by just random chance. They were both taken by the same person. Susie has helped establish, an awareness group out there called the Leave a Light On group. And it's really been a lot of her hard work and the private investigators' hard work, because I guess the actual police, there's only not much they can do until they have actual evidence to work with. I don't know how the law works in Australia. I mean, here in the States, you need proof and stuff like that. You need evidence to get warrants and stuff here, so I'm sure it's fairly similar out there. But a private investigator and private people, they don't have to cut through red tape or anything. But based on the testimony of the grandson, Mark, based on him saying that the two girls were taken to the area of Yatina and they were brought to his shack where they were both killed and then they were both buried. He was there with his grandpa when he was injuring them or killing them, and here's where you can find them buried. I mean, that is really the only solid thing that's come out of all of this, is that it's brought them to a location where he said they would be, where they found a shoe and they found a bone fragment. And the sister Susie, I saw a quote where she says that she believes in her heart of heart that it was Stanley Hart who did this to those two girls. There was also, a family friend at that soccer match with the two families. He only is known by the name Frank. According to some of the people who were there with them, Frank, who was sitting in that same group, got up and left approximately 30 minutes before the girls did. Frank, knew the families and knew the routine these girls would take to go to the bathroom, because there was a routine, I guess. And when they first realized the girls were missing, Frank was now back into his seat, but he did not get up and help search. He did not look for them. So was Frank involved and helped, Stanley? Was Frank involved and he did it all on his own, but then how did he do anything to the girls? What did he do with them in a short amount of time that nobody could find them? Those are questions that are pretty much going to be left unknown, because their biggest suspect, Stanley Hart, who all the properties they've searched have been his properties. By the way, I don't know if they have established a connection between Stanley and this Frank person. I don't know what Frank's actual name is, but everything is pointing towards Stanley Hart. I mean, you have an eyewitness account from, a convicted pedophile at this point, but still something, and you find evidence at locations where Stanley lived or resided at. It all kind of just sort of points to them. Even the families are like, yeah, it sounds like it's him. However, Stanley Arthur Hart will never face justice if he did something to those two girls. In June of 1999, Stanley Arthur Hart died an old man, taking with him to the grave any information and any truth about what happened to those two girls. And so now it may no longer be about getting justice. Because if it wasn't him, then obviously you have another suspect to look for. But the goal now is to find the two girls. That's the most important thing that they are trying to do. They are out there somewhere. They're buried somewhere. In all likelihood, if Stanley did all of this, he probably moved their bodies more than once. I mean, it's been known to happen. They do that once they think police might be onto them. They're maybe they're living at a property, they move to a different property, they want to move the bodies somewhere else. It's happened before countless times. And so there is evidence that those girls were at least at one point buried there, potentially, maybe. And so that's it. They're just going to be out there looking for them. And if Stanley was the guy, he got away with it. And hopefully he's rotting in hell. If it wasn't him, they got more work to do. Another potential suspect was, I guess, a man named Errol George Redan. He was a known pedophile in the area when all of this happened as well. He was investigated very briefly before 2022 because that's when he died. I guess he looked pretty similar to the composite drawing as well. But I don't know, when I see that composite drawing next to the image of Stanley, I'm like, holy shit, that looks just like him. I mean, that's almost identical, but it is just a drawing. And so it's not an image of the actual person. But this Errol Redan person, they investigated him, but then he died in 2022, and they never found any evidence that he had any connection to the girl's disappearance. I mean, they did search his property and they found like clothing items that would be worn by young girls. They found them that he had stored them in some drainage system underneath his property, which is fucking weird as shit. But yeah, he had been convicted at one point for pedophilia. So there is a chance that maybe he could have done it. It doesn't really sound like they can say for sure who did this. So you have numerous suspects. You've got plenty of peoples of interest, but no evidence to directly link any of them to their disappearance. But the families of these two girls are going to be fighting like hell till their very last breaths to find out where those two girls are and if justice can be served to get justice. Someone somewhere out there might still be alive who knows the truth, who knows what happened to those two girls, and who can help bring those two girls home. Perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on the whereabouts of those two young girls or what may have happened to them, you can call 131444. If you know something, if you saw something, please say something. Please help these two young girls get brought home and maybe, potentially, get the justice they rightfully deserve. But that is it for this case, True Crime, Aruni Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, hello, if you're new here, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here, obviously, multiple times a week, so please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Hit the bell so you're notified when I post new videos. Please leave a comment, drop a like so more people can see the video, share it if you want to. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. My TikTok page is over or down below in the description in the link tree, so feel free to follow that if you want. Also in that link tree, you're going to find my case list. It's a very long list. If you scroll through it and you don't see a name on there that you want me to cover, just send me an email, which is also listed below. The name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add that case to the list, and I will cover it at some point. I choose cases typically at random. However, if you are a loved one connected to a missing person or a cold case, unsolved murder, let me know in that email that you are a direct loved one, and I can make that case a priority. But that will be it for this video, True Crime Aruni. So until the next case, ta-ta for now.